Oh boy, this is a good one. Oh man, if you had spoken to me in 2018 about this idea, I would have absolutely loved you for it. Today we're talking about the Vancouver Canucks and some notes that were given to us about this team via the Canucks News Summaries Twitter account. Yeah. Try to take a wild guess as to what Canucks News Summaries goes out there and posts. They essentially take Vancouver Canucks related radio hits, audio hits, video clips, etc., and just kind of give the tail of the tape here. Today, or yesterday, they went out there and transcribed a lot of the recent Sekeres and Price show. It was broadcasted on a Twitter, and the Canucks News Summaries folks went out there and gave us the scoop. Now, this is a very long image, and there are a bunch of guys that are spoken about here in the video clip, but what I wanted to do was ignore the conversation about Thatcher Demko, ignore the conversation on Kevin Lankin, and ignore the Dakota Joshua situation, and instead describe what is spoken about on the Sekeres and Price episode when it comes to Buffalo Sabres defenseman Bowen Byram. Let's read some of the points here that are talked about. When it comes to Bowen Byram, Darren Dreger, who was the guest on this show, would not say that he's available. He's also not sure of the long-term fit in Buffalo. Dreger has been told to keep Byram's name circled, however. The Sabres aren't shopping him, but a team or two have indeed called. It depends on where the Sabres are at in the middle and the second half of the season, and Dreger also said that he's not sure if the Canucks have been one of the teams that has called. He does know, however, that there has been some interest from some Western teams. We know the Canucks are looking for that type of defenseman. Byram is an RFA after this season. The question is, can the Sabres afford to pay Byram what he would demand? There are other conversations that are spoken about here. There's a Karamaki conversation, there's a Cam Fowler thing, Rasmus Andersson, etc., etc. It's all from Darren Dreger on Sekeres and Price. But when it comes to that guy, no, not Dreger, the guy, but the guy that we had spoken about as a trade chip, Bowen Byram is a really interesting name. The Cranbrook, BC native, Vancouver Canucks local boy, and former Vancouver Giants superstar is a really interesting prospect because, prospect? No, he's not a prospect anymore. He's 23 years old, left-handed guy, signed on to the end of this season, making $3.8 million a year. And he's coming off a very difficult development path. I say difficult because he was drafted 4th overall by Colorado back in 2019, and there was this sort of idea saying, hey, you got Cale Makar, who was super good and taken 4th overall in 2017. Bowen Byram is going to do the same thing because he was the first defenseman taken in the 2019 draft. He was the best guy there, in most people's opinions. Maybe not nowadays you could say that's the case, but still, Byram was awesome, and he was like the top point producer in the WHL playoffs the year he was eligible for the draft. He eventually went back and dominated once again before playing with the Colorado Avalanche for a few seasons in a row. In his best season with Colorado, he had 24 points in 42 games played, 10 goals, 14 assists in 2022-2023. He shortly followed that up with 20 points in 55 games before getting traded to Buffalo for Casey Mittelstadt, where he actually did start to produce a little bit of a better clip. There, he had 9 points in 18 games played, also 5 points in 9 World Championship games, and this season he is at half a point a game with 6 in 12 games, on pace for about 41 points. The thing is, with Bowen Byram, if you go over to the Buffalo Sabres and their line combinations, they're in a pretty weird spot with these top-tier D-men. Because Rasmus Dahlin is the guy. He is the captain. He is supposed to be that good. But then you also have yourselves another first overall pick on the second pairing, a left-handed guy by the name of Owen Power. Rasmus Dahlin and Power are both first overall guys with superstar caliber potential, and Bowen Byram is a superstar caliber potential left-handed D-man who is now playing on the right side. He's a top pairing right D with Rasmus Dahlin, although of course Byram is not a right-handed defenseman. Playing on your offside definitely changes the way you're able to maneuver around the zone, and I'd say that Vancouver, while they have had some good results out of Erik Brannstrom in the limited sample he has had so far as a left-handed right side D, I'd say that the right side left-handed defenseman experiment doesn't really work too well in Vancouver. And maybe I'm just scarred because when I think of a left shot guy on the right side, I think of Nate Schmidt, and that really was not a good experiment for Vancouver. but I'd say that Bowen Byram's probably a better player than Schmidt, right? I mean, he's playing top 2 minutes after all. Sure, his point production is not as good as some of the other guys that were taken in that 2019 draft even. Some of the other defensemen in that draft class are so good nowadays, it's kind of crazy. You've got Philip Broberg, Mo Seider, Cam York. Yeah, it's been a little bit of a tough ride here for Bowen Byram compared to the other dudes, but still, he's been pretty good. And now he's getting, let's say, 21, 22, 23 minutes of time on ice per game ever since being promoted to that top pairing. He's looked pretty alright in the process, so this is the kind of guy whom, if the Vancouver Canucks wanted to say, hey, we want to just load up our left side, move Byram into the top 4, move Soucy to the bottom pair because he's been struggling this season, you have a lot more offensive support on that second pairing with Tyler Myers and Bowen Byram, and you can have Bronstrom and Soucy together as a bottom pairing that has a lot of versatility and maybe a little bit more stability with Soucy getting fewer minutes. This idea makes a lot of sense, and it would really please the Canucks faithful who have been watching Bowen Byram tear it up with the Giants when he was in that system for all those years. Of course, though, the price would be very high. The Buffalo Sabres acquired Bowen Byram in the trade with Casey Mittelstadt, a player who has since become very good for Colorado, and also a guy that was pretty reasonably valued in Buffalo too. Former top 10 pick in 2017, he was in that rivalry battle with Elias Pettersson that was mostly, admittedly, put on there by the fan base, and I'd say Casey Mittelstadt has been a pretty valuable ad. Bowen Byram has been valuable too. It's not going to be cheap at all if the Vancouver Canucks wanted to trade for Bowen Byram of all people. It is just interesting, however, that Drager notes that there are some teams, like Western teams, that are interested in this guy, and they have checked in, tried to get that conversation going with the Buffalo Sabres, just trying to see where the market's at. If I were to guess, I'd say the price for a Bowen Byram would be like a first-round pick plus a prospect, if not a legit roster player. I mean, if Vancouver wanted to send over, let's just say, I don't know, a first-round pick, plus a guy like Derek Forbort, for example, and another prospect that's not really all too great, but is still reasonably good, and then they get Bowen Byram in exchange, maybe that's the deal that makes it work. Who really knows? It's not going to be easy because Byram still has a lot of pedigree as a player considering his draft status and considering his usage in 2024-2025. It's kind of ridiculous to think of him even being available on the trade block, but if you think about it, okay, the Sabres just shelled out a whole bunch of money to Dahlin, shelled out a whole bunch of money to Owen Power. Do they need extra dollars to give to a guy like Bowen Byram? Is this really the best way to use their funding? Or should they just go out there, try to bite the bullet, get some younger dudes, like they've been for the past few years now, and try to capitalize on some of these other players who are on ELCs or lower dollar amount deals? Is Bowen Byram a little bit too expensive? So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're a Vancouver Canucks fan, how do you feel about the idea of BB, Bowen Byram, heading over to Vancouver in some sort of a trade capacity? What do you think the trade price should be? What do you think the Buffalo Sabres would be okay with getting in exchange? And if you're a Sabres fan, what are your thoughts on this entire idea of trading one of your better, I'd say, defenseman, a guy with so much pedigree and a player whom you traded Casey Mittelstadt away for? What are your thoughts on this entire idea of sending Byram over to Vancouver? I hope you enjoyed this video. 99 and bye.